Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. In this episode we're going to talk about switching. So we're going to look at how to create our segments, how to attach our VMs to it. We'll look at testing connectivity, pretty easy stuff to do, and then we'll wrap up with looking at how those tables get populated. I talked about it in part one. We'll see it live now. Okay, so this is part two of that of switching, logical switches in NSX. So I'll be right back. Hi everybody, thanks for sticking around. In this demo, we're going to create our segment and attach some VMs to it, and we're going to test for connectivity. And we're going to look at those tables I talked about in part one. All right, so this is part two here. All right, so I'm already logged into my NSX environment. I'm going to click on networking, and I'm going to click on underneath connectivity. I'm going to go to segments, and then see I've got no segments here. Let's add one in. Add segment. So I'm going to call mine web segment. I don't have much of an imagination. Connected gateways. Typically you would connect your segments to a gateway so you could do routing. I don't have any set up, so I'm just gonna leave this blank. Transport zone. You'll notice over here, this is the important part. You gotta ask yourself, what kind of segment is this? Is this a overlay network, or is it gonna be a VLAN backed segment so I could get connected to the physical world? This is an overlay, so I'm going to pick my overlay transport zone. Very common mistake, people will select the wrong transport zone. And this transport zone tells me which hosts or transport nodes this segment will span across. Now notice over here it talks about a gateway. Again, I'll talk about that when we get into creating our gateways and our routers in the next batch, okay, next video. There's the admin state, so you can actually go into a segment and administratively turn it off. So let's say something is bad happening, you want to shut down that segment, you see some malicious traffic, you can do something like that. I'm just going to leave it alone. I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to hit save. Okay, do I want to do any more configuration? I'm going to say no. Great, there's my web segment. Let me add two more. Let's add an app-segment, and I'm going to pick my overlay transport zone. I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to save it. And I don't want to make more configuration. I'm going to go to add another segment. Let's do db-segment, database segment. Again, I'm going to pick my overlay transport zone. I'm going to scroll down and hit save. And no, I don't want to do any. There we go. Created three segments. Can't get any easier than that. Let's go into vSphere and see what it did in vSphere. Let me go into the networking view. And you'll notice if I collapse all this, I have two different distributed switches. I've actually got two clusters set up. The distributed switch 01 is where my hosts are that I configured for NSX. I'm going to expand that and you see all the port groups. Look at this, app segment, database segment. Let's scroll down, web segment. You'll notice again the icon's a little different, and notice it's got a little N over here showing you it's NSX. If I right click on this, again, edit using NSX. I can migrate VMs to it if I want to, right? I'm not going to do it that way. I'll show you that later on. So for you vSphere folks, NSX segment is really an over-glorified port group on a distributed switch. Okay, so that's probably the easiest way for you to remember it. Let's go into my host and clusters view. Let's add some VMs. I'm going to right-click on Web 1, edit settings. Web 1's network card, first of all, is connected. That's important. If that's not checked off, it ain't going to have any connectivity. It's hooked up to by default to a standard switcher called VM Network. I'm going to browse, and I'm going to go down, and I'm going to select Web Segment. And I'm going to say OK. There we go. And I'm going to say OK. Let me add in some more. Edit settings. Browse. Scroll down to Web Segment. Say OK, OK, and let's do that Web 3. You're going to do this a few more times, folks. It's pretty straightforward. Again, I could have done it from the networking view to migrate a bunch of VMs, which you'd probably do, to be honest with you. But I'm just going to do it the slow way so you folks can see it. There's my webs. Let me go to my app VM, edit settings. Let's go into here. We're going to put the app on the app segment. Pretty straightforward. Come on. Okay. Let's go to the database. Do the last one. edit settings. Come on, now let's go to VM network, browse, and database segment. And say, alrighty then. There we go. So they're all on the segments. Let's go back to NSX. I'm going to refresh this screen over here. Notice over here, first of all, it says ports/interfaces is 0. All right. I can hit the refresh. Boom. You now see that come up. So there's my web segment at the bottom. I'm going to click on the number 3, the link, and it shows me my 3 VMs. Min state is up. Again, I could turn these off if I want to. I can go into the individual port and turn it off. I'll cover that in probably another video about segment profiles and port profiles. We won't cover that here, right? But I could actually control the behavior on segments and secure it or whatnot. So there's my, that's what it looks like. Let's test connectivity here. Let's go back to vSphere. Here's my web. Notice web 1 is on host 1, and it has an IP address that's 172.16.10.11. Web 2 is on host 2. 172.16.10.12. Web 3 is on host 3, 172.16.10.13. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do something here. Actually, no, I'll do that afterwards, okay? So great. Let's go and test for connectivity. Let's go to Web 1. So they're all on different hosts. Let's go to launch the console. And then root, VMware, bang. And I'm going to ping, so I'm on ifconfig, I'm on web 1, you see the address 172.16.10.11. Let me ping 172.16.10.12. Cross our fingers. Boom, it's working. Let's do 13. Boom, it's working. So these VMs are on different ESXi hosts or different transport nodes. So that ping from web 1 here is leaving host 1, getting encapsulated in Geneva, arriving at the TEP on host 2, and then getting decapsulated and sent up to web 2. All that's happening underneath the covers. And I talked about that when we did our packet walk in part 1. So if you haven't seen part 1, you definitely want to see that. Okay. Let's try something else here. So I know my web is working. Let's look at app VM. App is, again, 172.16.2011, and a database 172.16.30.11. Let's try hitting those. So let's ping 20.11. That's app. It's going to fail. Come on. Not unreachable. Let's ping 30.11. Come on. It's going to fail. There we go. And that makes sense. So you might be wondering, well, why doesn't it work, Steve? Remember, VMs on the same segment can talk to each other. VMs on different segments, they can't talk to each other. Okay, remember, segments is a layer 2 broadcast domain. So for segments to talk to each other, we need a router between them or a gateway. And that's a different topic altogether. So we're going to leave that alone. Let's go and take a look at the tables now. So let me go into, let me get rid of that. Let's go into here. I'm going to SSH into my NSX manager. Close that screen, there we go. So first of all, I'm on my NSX manager, and there's various commands you can run. I'm just going to show you a few right now. So first of all, what I need to find out is what my segment's VNI numbers are, the virtual network identifier, right? So let me type in get logical switches. I can hit tab to autocomplete for me. I hit enter. And you now see, here's my 3 segments. You see app segment, web, and database. So over here, you see the UUID of the segment. I could use that. That's too long. All right. And then you see the VNI over here. That's kind of small for me to see. So you see the VNI 66561. Let me write that down. 66561. Okay. Now, I want to examine the TEP tables, the TEP, MAC, and ARP tables of the web segment. And again, if you watched part 1, right, I showed you how those tables got populated, right? So let's type in get logical switch. What was it? 66561. Or I could type in the UUID. I don't think so. And then I'm going to look at the VTEP. I'm going to hit entry. Remember the 3 VMs? We're running on 3 different hosts. Boom. So I should expect to see 3 different TEPs here. Okay. So this kind of wrapped around on me, unfortunately. But you see there's the VNI ID. Sorry. the VNI ID. You'll see the IP address. This is the IP of the TAP. That's the TAP IP of host 2, TAP IP of host 3, and test IP of host 1. Okay? You'll see, actually, you know what? When I look at this, I just didn't recognize the numbers, but technically speaking, you could go and view that within vSphere, and I showed you that when we were preparing our transport nodes. You'll see there's a label over here. This doesn't really get used now. I know back in the older days, that was basically, this label was a way the control plane identified the local control plane agent on the transport node. I don't really use it, to be honest with you. I look at this and go, yeah, whatever. You'll see the subnet of it. You see the MAC address. This is the TAP's MAC address. And then you see the transport node ID. You'll see the NCAP type, right? And it's wrapping around. The encapsulation type is over here, Geneve. And then it says then the transport binding says here it's invalid. Don't worry about that. Invalid there. I've seen that ever since, it's like for many years now. I've been told, again, from engineering and VMware, that may be used for some kind of future feature or something. I have never seen anything there. So don't freak out if you see that. That's okay, all right? So we see we've got our 3 taps. Great, that makes sense. Let's look at the MAC table. Bam, 3 entries. What do we see? The VNI ID. We see the MAC address. Now, I call this the magic table. You'll see this is the MAC address of my VM. And you'll see this is the TAP that VM is on. So you can look at this and say, okay, if you're looking for this VM, it's on this TAP. You'll see I'm not doing any IP6 stuff, and you'll see the transport node ID. That's the UUID of the transport node. Again, I don't really use that often, but again, it's useful for other stuff. Great, there's the MAC table. Let's look at the ARP. 1, 2, 3, ARP. And we got 3 entries in here. So now in the ARP table, you see the VNI ID, you see the IP address of the VM, and you see the MAC address of the VM. So it's a typical ARP table. So there's the VM's IP, there's the VM's MAC, and you'll see the transport node it's on. Okay? Now, one of the questions I sometimes get is, Steve, do these tables get flushed out? The control plane, central control plane, doesn't flush these tables out. It's sort of a yes and no answer. Control plane doesn't do it. It's up to the transport node, because remember, control plane doesn't run in the data plane. It runs on the management network. The transport node sits in the data plane. So technically speaking, it's the transport node's job to say, hey, you know what? Go flush this table control plane, right? Or central control plane. That's its idea. Now, let me kind of tell you what I've seen in the past and what I've kind of noticed now, right? So in the past, I would look and say, when I got this question, I would say, no, the VTEP and MAC table would stay there. So if I leave this alone, come back in 2 months, and I don't do anything, my MAC entries in the MAC table and my VTAP entries would still be there. Okay, it doesn't get flushed. Now the ARP table did get flushed. Notice I said did. Okay, the ARP table did get flushed, and it was sort of. Okay, so if the VM had a static IP address, what would happen if nobody talked to that VM? So if the transport node says, hey, nobody's talked to this VM in 5 minutes, it would tell the central control plane remove the entry. So technically speaking, if your VMs had static addresses, this table would flush out for that entry in 5 minutes. That's what I've noticed. If it had a DHCP address, it would be flushed out based on the lease time. So let's say you had a lease of 3 days. If nobody talked to that that VM in 3 days, the transport node would say flush it from the tables. But typically with DHCP, usually after 50% of the lease, it goes and requests that address again. So technically speaking, what would happen in a day and a half, it would hit that DHCP server and request that address. So it just created some communication. So that timer would start all over again. So typically with DHCP, I would never see the addresses flush. With the static, I would see it flush at 5 minutes. Now, I'm just going to say something. Now, I can't remember what version this. I noticed this, and it might have been 3.2 or something. I can't remember. There's all the different releases and stuff. Maybe it was 3.1. I can't remember. I've noticed now that the ARP table doesn't get flushed at all, even with static addresses. Okay, and I would leave it for quite a while. Now, I haven't tested that in 4.x, to be honest with you. Okay, so keep that in the back of your mind. Let's do something else here. Let's do something a little interesting. Again, if you saw part 1, we talked about the tables. Let me minimize this. Let's. I don't need to be viewing this here. Let's close that down. And Web 1 is on host 1. Web 2 is on host 2. Web 3 is on host 3. Let's do something interesting here. Let's put Web 1. I'm going to drag and drop it on host Web 2. Sorry, I'm going to drag and drop it on host 1. This is called a vMotion for those of you that might not be familiar with it. I'm migrating a VM live while it's running. Let me do the same thing with Web 3. Let's put it on host 1. Let's go back. There we go. Web 3. We wait. Great. Well, that's done. Let's look at the tables now. Let's go back and look at the VTEP table. Come on, don't make a liar out of me. 1 entry. So let's look at the Mac table. Should still have 3 entries, but the table got updated. Notice all these VMs are running on the same TEP now because they're all running on that same host. Okay, and then if I look at the ARP table, I still have my 3 entries there. So we see that, and I mentioned this in part 1, when you do vMotion, the tables get updated. The local control plane on the host updates the table. Let me show you something else as well. Let me go back. Let's put these VMs back, okay, before I forget. So let's put Web 2 on host 2. It's really quick. Next. Web 3 on host 3. Come on. 3 on host 3. We go next, finish. Let's just wait and see. And it's done. Let's go back in and look at our tables. It should be back. Let's VTEP. We should have 3 VTEPs there. Drum roll. There we go. Boom. We got our 3 entries back for 3 VTEPs. And then again, if we look at the Mac tables, those will be updated again with the appropriate taps where the Macs are found. Okay. All right. You see the tap portion here has all been updated. And if we look at the ARP table, again, that should be up. Oh, notice that. Wait a second. Let's see this. That's interesting. Look at the ARP table. 11. I only see 11. That's actually rather interesting, right? So it looked like it got flushed out, those 2 hosts, right? Don't freak out if you see something like this. Like if I go in the ARP table and I don't see anything, maybe nobody's talking to that VM. Maybe it got flushed out. So I don't freak out here, right? Let's look at ARP. It got flushed. The ARP table did get flushed. Looks like it's 5 minutes. Okay, let's go in and I wasn't planning that, to be honest with you. Let's go into here. Let's go back into Web 1. Let's go to remote console. Let's ping Web 3. There we go. Web 2. There we go. I'll just do Web 3 again. There we go. Let's go back. Come on. Let's go back to the ARP table and take a look. Come on, baby. Don't make a lie. Bam, the entries are in there. That's exactly what I want to see. So don't freak out if you don't see anything in the ARP table. Test it. Oh, yeah, it's working. Boom. Then you should see entries. Okay? So that was kind of a neat thing to do. And last but not least, let me do this one other thing. How can I view these tables? There's other ways I could view these. Let me go back. I don't need this open. Let's go back to here. Let me go into NSX. If you don't like the command line, you can go to your segment. Here's the 3 vertical ellipses. Download the Mac table, download the VTEP table. You don't see anything with the ARP table. I'm not sure why, but anyways. So if I click on download the VTEP table, it's asking me, do you want to download it from the central control plane, or do you want to download it from a transport node? And you can pick the transport node. This is useful if you're doing some troubleshooting. You go, the control plane looks like the control plane has the right information. What about the transport node? Does it have the proper information? Maybe it's missing entries or something, right? So it's a way for you to do that comparing. You can also do it from a command line at the host. Honestly, I don't really use that one that often, but I'll probably cover it in a troubleshooting video at one point. Okay, so this is kind of neat. You can do this. You can download that. If I click on Control Plane Download, and you'll see it's a CSV file just downloaded. Okay. Let's do another thing here, and that'll be it. Let's go back to vSphere. Don't do this in production. I'm going to turn off these VMs. I'm going to right click. Now, normally you want to make sure you shut them down properly. I don't care about my demo. I'm going to power off just so it does it fast. Power off. Yes. Let's go into here, power. And I normally demo this stuff in my classes as well. If any of you have taken my classes. So there we go. I've shut down, I've turned off those 3 VMs or shut them down. Well, we know better. Let's go back and look at the TEP table for that segment. Boom, nothing's in it. So at the Mac, it's empty. And let's look at the ARP. Those tables got flushed because the host turned off the machines and it told the central control plane, these guys are no longer participating on the segment, get rid of them. Now, I don't see app and database VMs here, right? Because I'm not looking at the segment. Again, I'd have to, again, it's based, you get a set of tables for each segment. So I would have to look at the app segment individually and the database segment individually. You got to pick up their VNI. So we see that the tables got depopulated. Let's power them on again. So when I power on these VMs, what's happening? Underneath the covers, the transport nodes, the hosts, are basically doing a TEP, MAC, and IP report. Basically what is happening is the host, ESXi host, my transport nodes, are reaching out to the control plane, central control plane, saying, hey, you need to update, we just had a VM power on, you need to update the TEP table, the MAC table, and the ARP table, okay? And it's since all these VMs are on different hosts, the central control plane is also making sure that each of these hosts, ESXi 1, 2, and 3, all got a copy of these tables, all right? Let's go back and look. Let's look at the TEP table. Come on, don't make a liar. Bam, I got my 3 entries. Let's look at the MAC table. Come on. I got my 3 entries. And last but not least, the ARP table. I'm not going to freak out if I don't see anything, but I do have something. Okay? So that's it on the creating a segment. Pretty easy to create a segment. We tested connectivity. Connectivity between segments don't work because we haven't gotten gateways. That's the next video. And then we examine the tables that I talked about. If you folks enjoyed this, hit that like button. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, please subscribe to the channel. It only takes a click. It's free for you. It helps me out greatly, okay? Because this is how monetization works with YouTube based on subscribers and stuff like that and the amount of views. So thanks again for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you found this useful, and have a great day. Bye now.